cannot make a determination. Now you have an effect.
Okay, so in other words, you might get an inconclusive result or no result as a result of degradation.
Yes.
All right. Now, I'd like to show you the exhibit that's been marked as Defense 1362 for identification. If we could put that up. It's the large swatch blow-up.
All right, 1386, can you see this? 165, can you see this?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Mr. Goldberg.
Now, Dr. Lee, would it be correct to say that the four transfers that you saw on this item, item 47, were in fact relatively light?
Relative?
Light.
No, that's not, say, relative light. I saw lighter than those kind of transfer. In my opinion, this transfer sort of considered some are pretty defined and heavy. Other maybe classified lighter.
So that we're clear, though, Dr. Lee, this is the interior of the bindle, so that if I unfolded it, this is the inside. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you see any evidence of blood on the outside of the bindle?
I did not see that.
All right. Now, Dr. Lee, if we had a situation where I was working with a reference file standing approximately where I am right now, and this bindle were sealed closed in a coin envelope that was taped shut and sitting on the little podium in front of you, and I'm working with the reference file, you wouldn't expect that to account for these transfers, would you?
If the envelope seal with tape put in an envelope, in theory, should not get to the envelope.
It would be very difficult to imagine that happening, correct?
Very, very difficult.
Okay. Now, Dr. Lee, we use the term here wet and dry in connection with discussing Exhibit 1362. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And from a forensic science standpoint, as a forensic scientist, is there a little bit of an ambiguity when we're talking about the words wet and dry in relationship to blood?
Yes.
Okay. And is that because the threshold between wet and dry is somewhat fuzzy?
Wet and dry, that's not fuzzy at all.
Okay.
Either wet or dry, but they are in between damp. Not say soaking wet. What the wet definition of the wet? You kind of get into a semantic issue. As a scientist, if a swatch dry, it's dry. If it's not dry, anything else, I call it wet.
All right. What I want, I'll come back to that in just a second. But doctor, can you tell us when a swatch is dry, in the sense that it looks dry, and if I felt it, it would feel dry?
Yes, sir.
How much water does it have in it?
I have no idea how much water.
But it does have water in it?
I don't know.
Well, doctor, I just want to ask you a little bit about the book that you participated in, Forensic Science Handbook, Richard Saperstein. You're very familiar with this, is that correct?
sort of.
Okay, this is one of the references that you talked about when you were talking about the 20 books.
Yes,
Okay. And, sir, would you agree with the proposition that the
Check whatever you're.
Yeah, I'm going to I'm looking at page 385. Oh, he has it.
All right, Mr. Goldberg?
Sir, do you agree with the proposition that the threshold between wet and dry is somewhat fuzzy? Most apparently dry material does in fact contain some water. Proteins, for example, bind water very tenaciously.
yes, I
Yes.
agree.
Okay. And do you agree that the water content of dried materials is in equilibrium with the fractional saturation of water vapor in the surrounding atmosphere? That is the relative humidity. Thus, for example, blood dried to an equilibrium in air at 25% relative humidity may contain about 5% of its total weight in water.
May, yes.
All right. And, sir, what would the amount of water be if swatches were dried at 50% relative humidity?
I don't know how to calculate at this moment, may contain some water.
Okay, well, would you agree that it would contain as much as 10% of its weight in water?
Maybe.
And if the swatches were dried at 75% relative humidity, what would the percentage of water be in the swatches?
I have no idea.
Would 20% sound reasonable to you?
Reasonable.
Okay. Did you happen to go back and check the Saperstein reference book before testifying here about the swatches in this case?
No,
Okay. So there would be a number of facts that we'd have to know, such as relative humidity, in order to figure out how much water the swatches in this case had after they looked dry.
but doesn't matter. There are 7 swatches.
Well, I'm just asking you that.
If it dry,
Wait. You finish your answer.
thank you. If dry, should be all dry. If, say, some contains 20% of water, 7 all should contain 20% water.
Motion to strike.
Or will,
Would we have to know the relative humidity to know how much water was in the swatches,
That's
Doctor?
why I say I don't know.
Okay.
I have no idea what the percentage.
Well, can you explain for us in a little bit more detail the relationship between relative humidity and amount of water that's in a dried swatch?
I guess the best person have to explain that is whoever wrote that chapter. I did not read that. I want to see it. Is that my writing? Then I have to explain. If it's not my writing, I don't have to explain.
Actually, I think it's in Mr. Sensabaugh's
Okay,
chapter.
let George examine that. Explain that. That's not my
Okay,
problem.
would you like to take a look at this?
No, if that's not my writing, I don't have to explain anything.
Okay.
Because very difficult for you to determine in a swatch how many percent of the humidity. If he come up that number, I'm not going to argue with George. He is the one I have to explain.
Okay, but the bottom line is that after something's dry, it still does have some water in it,
Yes, I
correct?
agree.
All right. Now, Doctor, would you also agree that that there are a lot of variables in determining how long something will take to dry?
Yes, sir.
And have you looked at the Labor and Epstein materials that they put together in connection with a McDonald's book dealing with experiments in blood spatter analysis?
A long time ago, I did read some their material.
Okay.
Excellent material.
All right. And, sir, do you agree with the proposition that the amount of time required for a blood stain? Well, I'm actually reading it out of my notes.
proceed. Your Honor, yes, it does. Proceed.
At any rate, for the record, we've handed him a copy of Labor and Epstein.
Can I see what it is he's reading?
He said he's reading his notes. He can ask questions as he chooses. Proceed.
Your Honor,
Proceed.
Sir, do you agree with the proposition that the amount of time required for a blood stain to dry is dependent upon various factors such as weather conditions, temperature, air movement, humidity, size and depth of stain or blood pool, and the nature of the surface upon which the blood is shed.
Yes.
All right. And do you also agree that it's very difficult to predict all of the factors that go into determining how long something is going to take to dry?
Not necessarily.
Well, let me just ask you this, sir. Do you agree that there are so many combinations of factors that exist that affect the time required for blood to dry that it would be impossible to make determinations in every situation how long it's going to take?
If you look at a crime scene, blood stain, that's agreed wholeheartedly, totally, because that's beyond our control. Weather, rain, sunlight, shade, concrete versus carpet. If you're talking about a swatch, that's a totally separate situation.
Sir, according to your recollections of the Labor and Epstein materials, didn't they do a number of drying experiments of a single drop of blood on cotton to show that there were extremely wide ranges
Object to
of
this,
how
Your
long?
Honor, unless he is able to be shown the material and looked at it for whether he relies on it and what it is. I thought those were our procedures.
No, he doesn't have to see it. It has to be exhibited to counsel. That's what's going to be used.
that I haven't seen.
Do you have
I
that?
think he has the whole,
I don't
I think he has all Labor and Epstein.
Your Honor, he just handed me this as he's asking questions.
Your Honor, I
would like
object to
that
this
pointed out.
statement.
Proceed. Have a seat, Mr. Scheck. Proceed.
I'm sorry, I'm
I
sorry,
answer the
Doctor.
question now?
Yes, you may answer the question if you remember.
Well, in contrast, I think they come up some tables, give some general guideline. For example, single drop on cotton, if I remember correctly, it's about 5 minutes or something, or 45 minutes, something like that. I don't remember exactly. I read a long time ago. They have a table published in their, I think, the appendix back of the book, give more or less specific time.
Well,
If you give me a book, I can show you where it is.
let me, yes, I'm familiar with what you're talking about. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Dr. Lee, is it your understanding that they
You may.
concluded that the single drop of blood on cotton cloth could take from 55 to 330 minutes, depending on the circumstances, when they change circumstances around?
Right, that's the, if you look at the condition 3, that's a total different condition.
Yeah, right. And the purpose of this was to try to educate forensic scientists how difficult it is to ever predict how long it's going to take something to dry. Is that true?
At the crime scene, again, it's difficult to predict. In a laboratory setting, it should be controllable condition. We should know, take how long a swatch can dry.
Okay, wasn't the purpose of their exercise to educate the forensic science student in how difficult it is, even in a laboratory setting, with a single drop of blood on a cotton, to predict how long it's going to take to dry? Wasn't that what Labor
I
and
don't
Epstein-
think that's, you can call them on stand. I don't think they're going to say a single drop of blood stain on the cotton cloth going to be unpredictable.
Well, what I'm asking you, Doctor, is what the intent was of this material. And wasn't the intent to get across to the forensic science student, be careful, because it's hard to figure out how long something's going to take to dry, even in a laboratory?
Yes, certain condition, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, let's move on to the socks, doctor.
Yes.
On the socks, there was a sock that you were asked about that we've numbered 13A. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And would you agree, sir, that it's difficult, if not impossible, to reconstruct all of the various ways that different parts of a sock could come into contact with each other when you're taking it off?
Yes, sir.
And there's a stain on the sock that has been labeled 42A,
Yes.
and you know what I'm talking about.
Ankle stain.
And are you generally aware that that has been identified as having blood that was consistent with Nicole Brown?
Yes.
Okay. And then there's another stain that we've been referring to in the testimony that's on the inside, what we've been referring to as wall 3. Do you know what I'm talking
Yes.
about?
Yes.
Now, doctor, is it your position that we cannot say with positiveness whether stain 42 is in fact related to the stain on wall 3?
That's correct.
Now, could the quantity of blood on stain 42, 42A, be as much as a milliliter?
42A, you mean surface 1 or surface?
Surface 1.
Surface 1. Again, the calculation of the volume of the blood is a difficult chore, and I probably the only one wrote a paper in that. However, I entitled a paper called Estimation of the Volume of the Blood Stain. I choose the word estimation, not determination. As a scientist, I cannot come here to determine that's 1 cc of blood.
Okay.
There are so many ways to calculate, so many ways to try to come up some reasonable explanation. Unfortunately, although this socks, probably I would say the most examined socks in the world, so many people look at these socks. But a big hole being sampled. Now I look at the remainder thing, try to go back, say what's the volume. I did not look at the center portion. I cannot come here, in fairness, tell you how much blood in there.
Okay. And this is another one of those examples of something where a leading forensic scientist or a number of leading forensic scientists can look at an item and they just can't provide us with all of the answers. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And that doesn't mean something's wrong, does it?
It does mean something wrong if at the beginning, first day, I have an opportunity to look at the socks. I can give you a really, really close estimation. But since a big hole there, I cannot recreate a hole.
Well, weren't there photographs, though, of the socks before the hole was cut out?
I was not privileged to have a
Photographs.
photograph shows the blood stain intact.
Okay. But the point is that even with all those things, sometimes we can't do anything more than give a rough estimation. Is that
Yes, sir,
correct?
that's correct.
And that doesn't mean something's wrong, does it?
No.
All right. Now, let's talk a little bit about the mechanism of transfer. You've explained what a compression transfer is. Can you just give us a very, very brief additional explanation of that, sir?
The liquid blood, either on an object or already on surface, have certain pressure applied to it. I cannot come here again tell you how big the pressure, certain pressure. This liquid being transferred onto the surface, that's called compression stain.
Okay. And can you give us a brief explanation as to what a swipe is?
A swipe, you start generally when first moment contact, that probably can be a compression. Then with a lateral movement, you either the surface, receiving surface move, or the applying surface move. And could be both surface moved. That's called a swipe.
And those are two separate things, is that correct, doctor?
There are two separate definitions.
And to a forensic scientist such as yourself that has some expertise in the area of blood splatter, that's an important distinction, isn't it, between swipe and compression?
It's important, but sometimes, again, have a gray area. You can't really tell too clearly. That's a compression or a swipe. Sometimes it's a combination.
But if you can make a distinction, that is an important one for a forensic scientist,
Yes.
correct? And if Mr. McDonald testified that that distinction was not important, would you agree with it?
I don't know exactly he referred to. If he referred a special situation, that's nothing wrong. If say every case, you shouldn't distinguish a compression and swipe, then it's wrong. Certain situation, a compression and swipe may be a combination. That's, again, each individual have their own opinion. And I'm not going to argue with everybody entitled, all the expert entitled their opinion. Certain scientific fact should not be argued about it. As far the opinion, they're entitled to give their
Okay,
opinion.
well, I don't want to ask you to criticize someone else, but would it be fair to say that with respect to that part of Mr. McDonald's testimony, you take a little bit of a different view?
Again, as I indicate, if on the particular item, maybe no differences, if in overall picture, a crime scene, a swipe, a compression, maybe make a difference.
Well, you heard that part of the testimony, didn't you?
I did not pay much attention on everything.
No, that particular part that I'm talking about where we got into the distinction between swipe and compression.
I don't recall. Some people may discuss with me. However, I did not really firsthand heard from Herb McDonald.
You weren't in the courtroom.
I wasn't in the court.
Right.
I wasn't.
Okay,
No, I don't think I was in the court.
all right. Now, Dr. Lee, with respect to the socks, getting back to the socks, is the stain 42A that we've been talking about
Yes, sir.
consistent with a person at the crime scene touching the socks?
You just look at the surface one, or you look at the whole socks.
Okay, let's take surface one so far.
Surface one, in order to have that, that's my interpretation now, okay? In order to have somebody touch somebody else's socks, the pants and the shoes have to have a separation to expose the surface. The best example I can give it to you, have to wear the pants like Michael Jackson type of thing. And certain portion of socks have to expose. If I wear my pants and the socks like that, if touch, have to touch my pants, not going to be the socks. So that's one condition. The second condition, the blood has to be liquid, not coagulate, not dry. Has to be in liquid state. Third thing, has to have certain pressure. I cannot tell you how much pressure, not just a gentle touch.
Okay, well, having said all that, if the pants are pulled up,
Yes, sir.
or if someone's kneeling over, or however it happens, the sock is exposed, and someone didn't grab the socks, but touched the sock, could that be with a bloody finger, wet bloody finger?
Has to be single finger.
Single finger?
Yes.
Okay, and could it also be a result, this transfer of, or consistent with, someone wearing that sock and the sock coming up against a bloody object?
Has to have a pressure in that one location, because we look at that's just one location. and very defined perimeter.
Okay, so the answer is yes?
Has to be certain condition to cause that transfer.
Well, yeah, if someone comes into contact with some pressure with some object that has wet blood on it, you can get that transfer.
Right.
All right, Mr. Goldberg, would this be a good spot?
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our mid-morning break. Please remember all my admonitions to you. We'll stand in recess for 15. Dr. Lee, you can step down. Are all parties are again present? Jury is not present. All right, Deputy Magnero, let's have the jurors, please. I'm sorry, Mr. Scheck.
Yes, Your Honor,
Hold on, Deputy Magnero.
my apologies for making the statement to the court in the presence of the jury about these exhibits. I just want to be clear on the rules. If the witness is going to be questioned about a section of a learned treatise, it has to be established, as I understood, that he relied upon it, and I thought as well that counsel would be given an opportunity. I just want to make it clear to the court that, we had some discussion about what would be used with Dr. Lee, and I was handed this paper seconds before the question was asked, and that's the only reason I wanted time to see exactly what was being asked of the witness.
You were given, see, let me tell you what my perspective is, Mr. Scheck, so we
Yeah.
understand each other. I did not hear the foundational questions to Dr. Lee that he was about to be cross-examined as to somebody else's opinion in a learned treatise. I didn't hear the questions. I didn't hear anything read from an article, so I assumed that your objections were premature. And that's the way I felt at that time, and I think that the way the testimony unfolded, that's what came out, because he was not cross-examined or impeached as to anything in a learned treatise that he didn't rely upon or agree with.
Well, if
I have much more confidence in this witness than apparently the lawyers do.
no, nobody can, I yield to no one in my confidence in this witness, but the point is simply a procedural one, because
I understand.
I don't want to be in the position of where I say something in front of the jury that...
But you understand the
and
context
you
of
and
my
I get
comment.
into a dialogue. If
This witness is not going to argue with either side about other scientists' opinions.
Your Honor, the point I want to make, just for the
Yes, you're
for the
entitled to
record,
see it, and if he's about to be cross-examined, you have the opportunity to
Right.
read to see what it is.
and he did, and I just so I'm clear on the practice, what happened was he was asked about Labor and Epstein generally. He said, excellent people. And then Mr. Goldberg read something from his notes, which in fact, it was my understanding, was either a direct quote or a summary of this. And
But
I
it was
thought at that point...
such an innocuous question that aren't there variables that have to do with how long it takes something to dry? That's a question that doesn't have to come out of a learned treatise, and that was obviously the focus of where Mr. Goldberg was going. It was not directly from this article. I agree with you. You've got the materials. If he's going to use specific passages to cross-examine, you're entitled to see it before we go into it.
Well, just for the record, and I'll make a copy of this for you, what then unfolded is that specific tables were used with different conditions for drying cloth swatches with 1 drop of blood.
But
under
the
different
objection should have
temperatures.
been then foundation.
Well, I thought I was trying to make them, but
Well,
I
no,
also, now
that was
that this
Mr.
has come
Scheck, that
out-
was a speaking objection. If you had said foundation,
well,
you probably would have been sustained.
Your Honor, I will get to it. I just don't want to have any misunderstandings between us.
We have none.
Okay, and I will make an application when this is done. I want you to take a look at it, because I think it opens the door to some other things that had
It
previously
may,
been
it may
excluded.
very well might. That thought crossed my mind when I heard it.
I just say, Your Honor, I didn't ask about any experiments. I asked him about the generalized knowledge that he has, which is what he testified to on direct. He was testifying it from his generalized knowledge
I
about
understand,
blood drawing.
but then you went into this chart where somebody else did an experiment about drying times.
Well, because he was the one that told me about it. I wasn't going to get into that, except
Well.
Dr. Lee wanted to.
Just because they go into it doesn't mean you should cross-examine on it. I thought he left you with a pretty wide parameter that if you set it out to dry at night and you come back the next morning, it ought to be dry. I think that left you a wide enough parameter to work with, but you insisted on making it tighter. So, I don't know. But I'll see what the article says and probably get to read the article over the lunch hour. Not that I don't have other things to occupy my time with. if the defense insists on pursuing this particular line. But you got the transfers. I mean, what more do you want? All right, the record should reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Dr. Henry Lee is still on the witness stand undergoing cross-examination by Mr. Goldberg. And Mr. Goldberg, you may continue.
Now, Dr. Lee, you distinguished in your testimony between the manner of transfer as opposed to the mode of transfer. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And the mode of transfer would be the exact mechanism. In other words, was it a hand? Was it a gloved hand? Was it a object? What is it exactly that caused that blood transfer? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, with respect to that issue, the mode of transfer, were you able to render any opinion regarding the mode of transfer onto the socks?
There are numerous possibilities. I cannot tell you which one is definitively one method.
So would it be fair to say that on that, this is an area where you were unable to render an opinion on that question, mode of transfer?
Yes, sir.
Now, you were asked a little bit about trace analysis on direct examination, and you said that it fell in the area of hair examination, somewhere in between class characteristics and individualization. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did you explain this, do you agree with this following statement? While it is difficult to make absolute individualizations in these areas, the trace analyst can make identifications with a high degree of certainty and can often establish partial individuality of a specimen with confidence based on experience and analytical results.
I would say 80 to 90% that statement correct. They forgot one thing, depends on samples. Not all the sample you can reach that degree of certainty. Some of the sample, yes, you can. Other sample maybe only can do a class characteristic identification.
Sir, have you ever publicly stated the comment that I just made in any public forum, whether it's published or oral?
Maybe in certain contexts. I try to tell the investigator how important trace evidence is in solving crime or dissociate a person from a crime. Trace evidence have particular value. Don't overlook trace evidence. Although trace evidence we cannot approach positive identification. Now two extreme, one called individualization, one called identification. A lot of physical evidence fall in between, degree, different degree. Fingerprint, that's a positive identification. Here, we cannot reach to that, say, just from this person, no other person.
Well, let me ask you this, Doctor. Maybe I can just approach counsel for a moment. for a second. Let me just ask you this, Dr. Lee.
Yes.
With respect to trace analysis. Would it be your position that in some cases regarding hair comparisons, that identifications can be made with a high degree of certainty and can often establish partial individuality of the specimen with confidence?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And there were certain items that you looked at where you packaged some hair and trace evidence in bindles in this case. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And one was the envelope, and one was Ron Goldman's boots, and the other one was the soil sample. Is that correct?
No.
That you-
Actually, 21 bindles.
Well, that you testified to on direct examination.
Testifying direct, yes, only 3. But in reality, when I examined, I found 21 separate bindles of trace
Okay,
evidence.
so I'm sorry, I was asking about the testimony. Now, with respect to these 3 items, Dr. Lee, did you do any comparisons yourself on any of the hair and trace evidence in those bindles?
No, I did not.
Okay. And is there any forensic significance to finding the materials that you found in those 3 items?
Unless examined, maybe some significance.
Well, sir, is it common to find stray hair and trace materials when you're analyzing a particular piece of evidence for hair and trace?
Yes.
And is there anything unusual about that?
Just shows the presence of trace, and of course, what type of trace becomes significant. Whether or not can link a person or dissociate a person now becomes significant. If you find trace, that's uncommon. We can find, if you give me time, I go to jewelry box, I can probably find hundreds of hairs, all different fibers.
Okay, and we might be able to find some hairs and fibers. We would be able to find some hairs and fibers in the jury box that don't belong to any of the jurors in this case.
If you give me time, I will find a lot of hairs and fibers, maybe nothing to do with the jury panel.
Even though this jury panel has been sitting in this jury box for quite some time.
Sure. Maybe I can find your hair there too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there wouldn't be anything unusual about being able to find hairs and fibers at a crime scene that don't belong to the suspects and the victim, is that true?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, you were asked a little bit about the generalities of crime scene identification, and the defense used a chart. It was Defense 1350, if we could just take a look at that. Now, sir, this chart was intended in order to represent the basic steps in terms of categories of a forensic examination from crime scene forward. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding exactly how to interpret the chart correctly. Let's say that we have a situation, doctor, where the biological evidence at a crime scene, let's say it's blood, is stepped in by a defendant and is deposited on the sole of his shoes. And then he takes it to some other location.
Objection to the form of this hypothetical.
Now, in that hypothetical scenario that I've given you, has the collection, in effect, been done by the suspect himself instead of by a police officer?
The collection actually involves two falls. You start with a recognition. If, say, an individual step in the blood, walk on the surface, you deposit some evidence on that walking, say, walkway surface. It's not by defendant himself. The detective or the criminals at the scene have to see it, to recognize it, try to enhance it, then collect it. If you forget about that, you create a big problem for future reconstruction. The second half, you are correct. The shoe itself become a valuable piece of evidence.
Okay.
Unless you found the shoe, you can't really do a side-by-side comparison.
Okay. And in that kind of a hypothetical situation where you had found a shoe like that, say, you would still be able to test that shoe for conventional testing and for DNA testing, is that correct?
Yeah, the shoe, again, the testing involves quite a bit now, not only serological analysis. You have to, the most valuable is the pattern comparison. Side by side, the shoe and the footprint, you have to compare, not only look at general characteristic, also look at the wear cut pattern, so-called individual characteristics. Grouping, just one part of it, whether or not you can link to certain source of a blood, just like hair, soil, whether or not you can link to the back to the scene. So the whole process is involving recognition, preservation, documentation, collection, everything.
Okay. And you would agree that well, let me ask another question. Let's change the hypothetical a
Yes,
little
sir.
bit. And let's say that instead of a suspect at the crime scene, we have a brand-new police officer at his first crime scene. And he accidentally steps in some blood.
Yes.
And he's a little panicked and he's nervous about doing that, obviously. But he immediately takes his shoe off, Dr. Lee,
Okay.
and he brings it to you.
Yes.
You would still be able to analyze the blood on that shoe, wouldn't you?
Your Honor, I haven't heard, no foundation.
If the shoe bring to me, yes, I will be able to identify whether or not that's blood. If it's in fact blood, human blood or not. If it's human blood, of course, just like you indicate traditional serological grouping, type A, type B, type O, DNA typing, try to see whose blood. Equally important, I have to look at the scene, whether or not I have same type of a shoe print.
Okay. So
Present.
there's a variety of testing that you could do, even in the hypothetical that I gave you.
And all start with recognition.
Yeah.
You
And
have to see it first.
okay. And in my particular hypothetical, though, Doctor, the police officer obviously didn't recognize the blood at the time that he stepped in it, right?
Yes.
And he didn't accurately document it or photograph it, is that correct?
Yes.
And you,
Object to this on foundational grounds and 352 grounds.
and would you agree, Doctor, that a police officer dabbing his foot in blood is, and then using his shoe for analysis wouldn't be the recommended collection technique?
I'm lost.
Okay, well, you go out and lecture police officers.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's say a police officer raises his hand. He's in the audience. Dr. Lee, if I don't have any swatches or I don't have any bindles to scrape off the blood, can I just dab my foot in it and submit my shoe for analysis?
Assumes facts, not an evidence, no foundation.
Would you tell the officer, well, I don't recommend that?
I probably tell, don't dab, just give me your shoes, and don't do it next time.
Okay. All right. So even though we have a big mistake in terms of recognition, in terms of preservation, documentation, collection, identification, we can still do comparison, we can still do individualization. Is that correct? In my hypothetical.
You're going to be on shaky ground, because unless we recognize everything, we can do partial reconstruction.
We probably
Partial.
can't do reconstruction.
Cannot do a complete reconstruction.
If I may first a second. So, in my hypothetical, we're probably going, we botched
Excuse me, Mr.
recognition.
You're blocking out number
We
7.
botched recognition.
Yes.
We botched preservation, documentation, collection in the hypothetical.
Right.
Identification, we nailed.
Yes.
Right? Comparison, we nailed.
Yes.
Correct. Individualization depends on how many probes.
Right.
Okay. Reconstruction, probably not.
Yes, that's correct.
So, Doctor, if we wanted to change the title of the chart from steps in forensic examination to garbage in, garbage out, that would be incorrect from a scientific standpoint, wouldn't it?
No, you cannot change my title.
Okay. Thank you, good.
But garbage in, garbage out, that's a common thing I use in lecture. You collect a lot of garbage from the crime scene. Laboratory scientist, my report going to like a garbage. You really don't know where they come from, what's going to happen, just say like a garbage report. You have to do a so-called totality team approach. Everybody have to work together,
Right.
do the best job, yes.
All right, but even in cases such as the one that I related where that's not done, sometimes, I won't say that you can save the case, but you can still get some meaningful test
Yes, sir.
results, very meaningful
That's
evidence.
correct.
All right. Now, if we changed our hypothetical again, Dr. Lee, so that the police officer photographed the blood stain properly before he stepped in it, then we might even be able to do some reconstruction as well. Is that true? Limited.
Limited.
Will again object to, unless there's facts and evidence, I think these hypotheticals and the changes have no foundation.
And, Doctor, when I was questioning you a little while ago, you were talking, I think that you said something to the effect that you wouldn't recommend someone using their hands to touch the swatches to see whether they were dry.
Yes.
But if we had someone who did that, and let's say our same police officer, our new police officer, he's new, oh my heavens, not only did I do all those other things, I also touched the swatches with my hands.
Foundation, facts not in evidence. Swatches?
Dr. Lee, would your procedure there be that you would take a blood sample from the police officer, correct?
Yes.
And you would test his, depending on what testing you were doing, you might do conventional serology, you might do PCR and RFLP, correct?
Yes.
And you would still then test the evidence, is that true?
Yes, I will test the evidence with the control. If somebody touch it, the body cell may contaminate to the evidence. That's one possibility. Second, only for the protection of the individual may have a cut, some hepatitis or AIDS or other virus may infect the individual. So touching not only is a contamination, also protection. If have some body material transferred to that sample, now you're going to have a contaminated sample. We have to have a known control, compare, try to resolve, see what we can do.
And although things like that aren't supposed to happen, every once in a while there are cases where something like that does occur.
Yes.
All right. Now, you were asked about the socks being packaged together in an envelope, and I just wanted to clarify your testimony on this topic. Is the packaging, let's say that you have two socks at a crime scene, and you collect them together and you put them in the same bag
Yes.
together. Is it your position that there could be a transfer from one sock to another sock?
It could be.
And that transfer could be hair and trace?
Also, could be biological material.
If the socks are wet at the time they're
If
collected?
the socks are wet, if have some body tissues or body material can cause a transfer.
Are you going to expect a transfer in your experience at that time if the socks are dry?
If have dry skin, tissue, those you don't need any wet material. If it's blood stain, sometimes this touch can have a trace transfer. If it's wet, you definitely going to expect transfer.
Is packaging the socks together in the way that I just described going to change the DNA type on the socks that was deposited there?
I cannot say specifically relate to this case, but if a case, for example, a simple example, let's say ABO typing, the victim is type A, the decedent is type B, if have a transfer, our reading going to be type AB, a mixture. What AB means could be a AB type. They are people AB type. There could be a mixture of A and B. In other words, the interpretation gets so complicated now. Sometimes it's possible to resolve. Other times, just impossible. You just call it, could be a mixture.
All right, let me make the hypothetical a little bit more specific then. Let's say that in our hypothetical we have a 15-probe RFLP match on one of the stains on our hypothetical socks that were
Yes.
packaged together at the time they were collected.
Right.
Does packaging at the time that they were collected change the DNA type?
In theory, shouldn't. However, if, let's say, hypothetically, because a lot is impossible, let's say just happen, well, I have to look at the band that's a homozygote or heterozygote. Let's say all the bands are heterozygote, 2 bands instead of 1. It's a remote, almost remote, but do have a possibility 2 individuals, each one have 1 band. Mixed together, become 2 bands.
Okay, now, if we know the contributors to the biological evidence on that sock, and let's say we know there's more than one donor to the blood on the 2 socks, then we can eliminate some of those mixture problems. Is that correct?
If we have a complete profile, maybe we can be able to do that.
And would you agree that even if the 2 socks are packaged together, a 15-probe match would be an extremely significant piece of evidence?
If it's genuine, that's a important evidence.
Right. Now, Dr. Lee, just very briefly on the issue of collecting clothes, and then we'll move on to a different topic. Is it your position in training police officers that where clothes are in a pile, for example, a number of different articles of clothes, they should in fact collect the clothes as a group and package them together in the same package? Is that the way that you train them?
Yes.
Okay. So there's not an absolute that you always have to package the clothing separately?
If they're separate, you should package separate. If you have a clothing on top of each other or you mingle together, for example, certain people take off their pants, The underpants come with it all together. You don't have to separate them in the crime scene. You should collect as one group.
And would you agree that with respect to the sock photos that you've seen in this case, in your analysis of the socks, we could never exclude the possibility that the socks came into contact with one another prior to being collected anyway?
I only can testify what I see. I saw the picture, there's two socks separate
Right.
clearly. Before that, I don't know.
Thank you. Now, getting back just to our chart, do you have another chart that you sometimes use in explaining the concept of crime scene investigation called your four-way transfer theory that's contained in the, excuse me, I think it's four-way linkage. I got it wrong.
That's become an international, well-known four-way linkage
Okay.
theory. That's one of my theories, yes.
Can we mark as people's next in order? It would be 591, Your Honor.
All right, you've given a copy of this item to Mr. Scheck.
I don't know if we gave him a copy or whether we just showed it this morning.
All right,
But it's
Martinez.
also. Your Honor, I'm just going to give Mr. Scheck a copy of the, well, I'm not going to give it to him. I'm going to let him borrow a page in the book.
All right, proceed. This is a slide you have made up?
Yes. And Dr. Lee, is this exhibit that we've just marked that says Henry Lee's four-way linkage theory A?
I wish only one Henry Lee. There are too many people called Henry Lee. I just found out in LA, the telephone books, a lot of Henry Lee.
Okay. Is this a summary of your concept of a four-way linkage?
Yes, sir.
And is it true that this is the goal of crime scene processing?
Yes,
So if a criminalist goes out to a crime scene, what he's trying to accomplish is the idea of what he or she is trying to accomplish is the idea of four-way linkage.
yes.
Can you please explain this to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
That's a pointer, Your Honor. Is this a...
I don't know if that's a pointer. Your Honor.
No, we don't have that working right now.
The crime scene,
I think that we can use the telestrator, but maybe the
yeah, just the
pointer's fine.
pointer is fine.
Okay.
Any investigation involves in four important elements. One is a scene. The crime scene itself has to be intact, preserved. Any time have a crime, have a victim. So victim itself become a crime scene. For example, a hit and run case, a pedestrian got hit. The pedestrian's body become a crime scene. A rape case, same thing. The rape victim become a crime scene. Of course, the suspect, who person or persons commit the crime, become a crime scene itself. And physical evidence, such as guns, shoe print, hair, sometimes earring can become a piece of physical evidence, tire track. All those four areas, as a good investigator and good criminalist, we have to have a concept of this embedded in our mind. When you walk to the crime scene, you should understand this nature. To link, you need a four-way linkage. You can link the suspect to the scene. If you found certain crucial physical evidence. Also, you can link the physical evidence back to the suspect or suspects. Also, you can link the physical evidence to the victim. So this four-way linkage is rather important. By using same analogy to case, let's say a hit and run case. On that street, we have a scene. At the scene, you can find blood. You can find tire track. You can find glass, metal, soil. The victim's body taken to the hospital. On his chest, maybe we find tire track. On his clothing, we may find imprint pattern. Maybe have glass fragment. The vehicle itself become a physical evidence, which, such as a broken lens, lost a, of course, ideally lost a muffler. We can pick up the muffler and physically and fit. You can have a link. And the suspect, of course, if the suspect after hit and run stopped, step in the blood, now we have a footprint. We can link the suspect. So this so-called four-way linkage, you have to always consider all the possibilities.
Doctor, can we perhaps use a simpler analogy or fact pattern? Let's say that we have a crime scene.
Yes.
Let's say it's a robbery,
Yes.
just so we're understanding the concept. And there's an article of clothing at the scene that has a hair that is consistent with the suspect that he dropped at the crime scene.
Yes.
At this point, it's foundational 352 forward.
And on that same article of clothing, there's also a hair that's consistent with the victim.
Yes.
Can you explain how that would work with your four-way linkage theory?
Let's say a piece of garment, which we do have cases, for example, robbery or burglary, getting too hot, they take off their jacket. Somehow left in a hurry, left in the scene. We found hairs. That hair can link to a victim. That hair also can link to a suspect. This hair also can link to a crime scene.
Okay. And if the suspect and victim hair is found on the same item, it also links the victim to the suspect.
Yes, could be. Link depends on the condition of the hair, depends on whether or not this hair so-called secondary transfer.
And it would also, if the article of clothing is found at the crime scene, link the physical evidence up to the scene.
Yes, sir.
All right. And is it true, Dr. Lee, I think we're finished with that. Is it true, Dr. Lee, that the hallmark of a crime scene identification is whether or not we were successful in establishing four-way linkage?
Yes.
Now, would you agree that it is very often that very experienced, capable criminalists or crime scene technicians or police will go out to a crime scene and very carefully, systematically process the crime scene, but they can't establish four-way linkage?
Yes, do have cases, either failure of recognition or failure of any of those steps. And sometimes maybe just not exist.
And is it also true that sometimes a less careful processing of the crime scene, less capable processing of the crime scene, can nevertheless result in four-way linkage?
Yes, sir.
Now, let's get to the issue, Dr. Lee, of the Bronco that you testified to a little bit in your direct testimony. Now, did you ever physically inspect the Bronco yourself?
No, as I indicate to the jury, I never physically, personally look at a Bronco.
And were you present, did you know that there was a search of the Bronco that was done on August the 26th of 1994?
I don't remember a specific date.
Okay, were you generally aware of some research of the Bronco that was done in August of '94, at which some defense people and some
Yes.
prosecution people were present?
Yes.
And did someone disallow you from coming there, or?
Not exactly the situation disallow me. I only can work on my spare time.
Okay.
On weekends. I cannot come here. I have a official duty. Also, the world cannot stop just because of this case.
Okay. So, with respect to your analysis in this case, is it true that part of the limitation was your own busy schedule?
Yes, because the day I want it, it's not available to me, and the day they want it, I cannot come here.
Okay. Now, with respect to the amount of blood that we're going to expect to find in an item such as the Bronco, do you agree with the idea that we can only interpret the blood stains that are physically present, and that no one should speculate as to why a defendant was not blood-stained except in the most unusual cases?
Yes, in general.
Okay. And do you agree, sir, that in the forensic scientific literature, that there is a lot of literature that indicates numerous references state an assailant is not always blood-stained as a result of their active participation in a bloodletting event?
That again, in general, depends on type of crime and what condition of the crime, what type of physical force involved.
Do you also agree that forensic scientists have to interpret what they see as opposed to what they don't see?
I disagree that absence of evidence not necessarily wasn't there. Absence of evidence maybe wasn't there. Maybe somebody just not experienced enough or incapable or inability to see that.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Have you read Mr. McDonald's article on the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence? The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
I'm a Chinese. Take me a while to think about this double talk. Absence.
Maybe let me see if I can get that for you. And okay, I put some lines on my copy. May I approach the witness?
Can you show Mr. Scheck what you have for?
Yeah, fine, Mr. Scheck.
Right.
Dr. Lee, why don't you just take a quick look at that and see if that refreshes your recollection as to whether or not you've seen that article.
I read a lot of article. Which paragraph you want me to read?
Well, you don't have to read it. I just want to ask you whether or not looking at it silently to
Oh,
yourself you recognize.
Okay.
All right.
Dr. Lee, do you recognize the article?
Sort of. I don't remember every line.
I know there's an enormous amount of forensic science literature out there, isn't there?
Yes.
All right. Do you agree generally with the findings of McDonald in this particular?
In general, yes, but the specific example he gave maybe not totally cover the whole situation.
Okay, but in general, do you agree with the proposition that we really can't infer that someone did not participate in a crime involving a bloody event simply because they don't have blood on their clothing or on their person?
Again, as I indicated before, depends on situation. One example said beat up the rabbit. Rabbit, human, that's two different things. You beat up a rabbit, did not get blood spatter on your clothing, doesn't prove you beat up a human, did not get the blood on your body. And I guess so, depends on situation. If you stand at distance, fire a shot, gunshot, let's say 30 feet away, kill somebody, I don't expect to find blood spatter on somebody's clothing. That's correct. However, if you put the gun next to somebody's head, fire a shot, nothing, no clothing block the back spatter, I expect to find some blood spatter. So it varies. I cannot, in certain sense, he's correct. In other situation, maybe not.
Okay, isn't there a lot of forensic science literature out there that generally cautions the forensic scientists who are involved in blood spatter that you can't really say that someone didn't participate in a crime just because they're not covered in blood, even if it's something like a stabbing?
Yes, sir.
All right. Your Honor, perhaps I can mark the article as People's next in order. I guess that would be 592.
Right. People's 592.
Sir, do you agree with the concept that we can only interpret the bloodstains that are physically present and that no one should speculate as to why a defendant was not bloodstained except in the most unusual cases?
Is he reading from something? I don't know.
These are my notes.
Again, generally, we only can interpret a certain pattern which we can see. If you did not see it, not necessarily wasn't there. You cannot interpret something you did not see. Then you say, not there.
What I want to know, Doctor, though, is do you agree with that particular quote that I just read?
In general.
Okay. Now, have you been involved? Let me ask a couple other questions first. Is it true generally that stabbings, generally speaking, involve less blood than beatings?
No. Stabbing depends where you stab. You can have a lot of blood. Beating depends where you beat. If you beat somebody's real end, when I was young, my mother used to discipline me. I don't see another blood spatter. So,
Well,
all different.
I'm talking about beating deaths.
Beating death.
Where someone's
Beat the head or
beating-
beat the body, and it's all different.
Okay, let's say that we have a situation where someone's beaten another person to death in the head with a brick.
This is not particularly relevant.
Well,
counsel.
that goes to the Bronco and a number of other items defense got into.
The cause of death here is clear.
Well, I'm just,
No, let's proceed.
all right. Now, sir, have you had some cases yourself in your own career as a forensic scientist where the crime scene was extremely bloody,
Yes, sir.
yet the suspect did not have a lot of blood on his clothing?
Off my head, I don't really remember every crime scene I went. In general, more blood, I should expect to find some blood on the suspect. Again, depends on situation. If a shooting at the distance, yes, victim lying there have a lot of blood, but suspect already a long gun, you don't expect to find that. Those are correct. If a close combat situation may be different.
Okay. Now, with respect to the Rockingham location, Dr. Lee, you saw some spots in the foyer, is that correct? Of blood?
Spot, yes.
Okay. And can you determine the difference as a forensic scientist between a 1 centimeter cut and a 2 centimeter cut based upon those 6 spots?
If the cut into a blood vessel, maybe. If not, I cannot tell you.
Okay, so if we're dealing with a cut that did not go into a blood vessel, then we cannot say from the number of dots that you had how big the cut was.
No. Just can say a small cut.
All right. Now, in addition to that, Doctor, when you were at the Rockingham location, did you have occasion to find any item that, in your forensic opinion, was consistent or appeared to be blood in the area of the air conditioning near Cato Kalin's house?
Yes, sir.
And was that something that you believed to, that you thought appeared to be blood?
I test some doorknobs, some sink traps, and air conditioner.
I'm just asking about the air conditioner.
I thought
Whether
you
you
asked
saw
for different
something.
places. Yeah.
Okay. That's all right, Your Honor. I'll move on. I think he's answered the question. Now, sir, with respect to the Bundy crime scene location, I'd like to ask you a little bit about what you did in terms of the reconstruction at that location.
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to mark, well, first of all, let me ask you, were your opinions that you offered regarding the Bundy location based upon what you saw in the photographs, or did you also take into consideration the testimony of pathologists in this case?
What my observation regards to imprint is my direct observation on June 25th on the tile. Also look at some physical evidence. Regards to this closing area, basically looking at photograph, the distribution of the pattern, the location of scene. Regards to some other information that did relate to me, some number of cut or stab or injury.
Okay, let me just make sure we're clear. So is it your position that as a forensic scientist looking at the Bundy location, you have to set aside what the pathologists say and just concentrate on what you see?
And the majority part. Of course, I consider the number of injury. Not only one thing I look at it. I
Okay.
did not look at the stomach content, livability, or post-mortem change.
Okay,
The
so in
rest.
other words, things that you can see yourself in
Right,
pictures.
right.
All right. Now, I'd like to mark as people's next in order an exhibit that's going to be 593, and it's a board of the Bundy location concentrating on what we've referred to in this case as the caged area and some photographs. Your Honor, one of the photographs is perhaps one that should not be suited for display.
All right. Mr. Bancroft acknowledges that. stay off the bottom row.
Dr. Lee, direct your attention to the exhibit that we've marked as People's 593 for identification. Can you see that? Let me have this.
Yes, you may, Dr. Lee.
Yes, I can see those in here now.
And Doctor, do those appear to be the same exact photographs that were used on a defense exhibit that you were using to explain to the jury some of the blood pattern or blood reconstruction analysis in the case? The 9 photographs you used.
Some appear to be the same, some maybe there are differences.
Are there any, which are the ones that you think are different?
The picture I used, for example, this key, I did see some reddish stain. However, this picture, when I look at it now, I don't see any reddish stain.
Because we're getting a different view of the key.
I have no idea.
Okay.
And these boots, the picture provided to me, have more like a blood stain compared to this. Yes, I do see blood stain, soil material trace, but much less. And this one is a much closer, it's a closer shot, but in general, this is the same. And some of those, this must be a so-called first generation. Better picture than what I get is a print out of the print. I would say in general, it depicts the scene. I wasn't there. I wasn't the one who took those pictures. So I can't really come here and mislead you, say that's exactly what I see at the crime scene.
Okay, for the record, the ones that Dr. Lee indicated could be somewhat different than the photos that he saw are on the right-hand side of this exhibit in what would be the extreme right portion as you're facing the exhibit. The bottom photograph depicting Ronald Goldman's boots, the photograph above that depicting the keys, and the photograph above that that appears to be a close-up of the card that has item number 108 in it. Is that correct, Doctor?
Yes.
All right. Now, but other than that, we've depicted all of the areas that were subject of your testimony in terms of the reconstruction of what happened at the Bundy location. Is that
Yes, sir.
all right. Now, Dr. Lee, could you use some red tape, if you have any, to show us where these items are on the diagram? I think I have some red tape here, actually.
You don't have a pole here. Basically, it's around here. I don't have a background body, so I really cannot
Okay, just
tell
give
you
us the
general location.
and now where are you pointing from what to what?
The pole should be like a, this
Oh,
is
the
a
tree.
landmark.
You put some tape from the sapling
Right.
over to the general location.
I cannot tell you the specific location. In this diagram has no, that, what you call sapling?
Sapling, yes,
Sapling.
small, or small tree. Here, let me just ask you this. With respect
Is
to,
it a tree or? It looks like a 2x4 to me. In front have a pole.
take a close look. Does that look like a a tree that's attached to a stake
Yeah.
for support. All right. Now, maybe we could just indicate, you could indicate for us this, from the gate, the stain, okay, you're connecting to, let's not cover over it, so let's just go like this. Right, from there to there. That be okay?
Sure.
Okay, so you've connected two photographs, is that correct?
Right.
And those are the photographs in the upper right-hand corner of the exhibit. Can you connect this gate that has the photo card 108 in it to where the gate would be approximately?
Okay, I only can, if you draw the picture diagram with the number of poles, I will tell you exactly. I only can tell that's number 8 here in the picture. I will say approximately in this location.
Isn't that closer to, a little closer to the corner?
You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 left.
6 bars.
You have 8 bars. When you look at this picture, you get round projection. That's called depth of the field. When we take a picture, the closer place looks like bigger. The distance one, like a distance shorter. Can you see the gap here? Much bigger. In real sense, all those gaps should be identical.
And with respect to the photo of the keys, can you connect that up to the general location?
Yes, sir. Again, just a general location. I don't have a plan here, shows me exactly the scene. I will say around here.
Okay, so that's somewhere, understanding this is an approximation in the area.
Very
Mr.
general,
Goldman's
very
speaking.
general.
And, well, I don't know if we should connect up the shoe, what do you think?
Because after,
Yes. All right, well, let's not
You cannot
connect,
really
let's
connect
not
this.
connect that. But can we connect the photograph that has photo card 11-9 in it?
well, again, I have to make some assumption this is here, the gate, because the picture, the diagram did not show me. I will say in this general location.
So that's kind of like the post that you would expect the gate to swing open and closed on. Now, directing your attention now, we're going to move over to the left-hand side of this exhibit. And why don't you just describe this for us orally, and then we'll connect it up. The gate portion, excuse me, gate's wrong word. The fence portion at the bottom,
Yes.
where is that?
This looks like somebody took a picture from other side of the fence. Look into the fence. For example, let's say the jewelry box, here's the fence. I'm taking a picture from here, not inside of the jewelry box. So, has to be other side.
Okay, now, Dr. Lee, would it appear to you then that the photo card bearing 109 is the same stain that's contained in the lower photo, only this is from the inside view?
Definitely different. It's same location, but here shows different stain here.
You mean the stain in the bottom photograph is not the same as this?
This one is this. This dripping, it's not showing in this photo.
Because we're showing,
Here have more spatters along the column. It's not showing in this photo.
okay, but would it be fair to say that at least the 109 stain is showing, the stain with the photo card 109 is showing in the lower photograph? But from
Very
the,
partial
and from the other side.
from the other side.
Would it be fair then for us to link these two photographs up?
And we'll try. Unless we put the tape other side.
And let's try to block as little as the
Right.
pictures as we can. You want to hold
Yeah,
that,
please.
You want to put this over here? just trim this a little bit so it's not blocking too much of the stain.
Actually, if for real, we have to go other side,
Right.
not this side, all right?
And can you tell us where the photograph that we're seeing now also has a stain on the lower portion of the rail? Is that stain the same as the 109 stain?
Yes, sir.
Okay, can we connect those, well, I don't want to block too much of it. Without blocking the picture, can we connect those two stains? So the view that we have with the 109 card in it is simply a closer up view of the view that we have with the 101 card that shows the beeper as well. Is that
Yes, sir.
correct? Okay, and then the view above that also shows the beeper. So can we connect the two beeper photos? Let's just not block that. Let's cut this a little bit. And now can you locate for us using our diagram the approximate location of the beeper?
Okay, now, we know that's hole number 6. However, again, I don't know, no indication of a sort of a measurement. All I can say it's around here. General location.
Could this beeper be in the approximate location if Ronald Goldman's head was up against a tree stump that's depicted in the photo that has the 101 card in it? Could the beeper be a little bit further to the Bundy, the Bundy side of the street?
Just stretch it a bit.
Should we add a little bit, you want to add a little more tape on there?
This is typical example of a two-dimensional diagram. We try to visualize a three-dimensional setting. It's almost impossible, but in general, probably this location. If this diagram give me number of holes, I can tell you exactly.
But at least we're getting a general location.
Right, right.
Is there anything else that you feel should be connected up on this? Hold on for a second. Let me just give you this photograph first, Dr. Lee. I think it's been marked as people's. Your Honor, I want to show people's 56D, but this is a photograph that also should not go out over the element. We're going to show you a photograph of it. Oh. Dr. Lee, I just want you to take a look at this photograph for a moment and try to get yourself oriented a little bit. Particularly on the beeper.
Now this beeper shows under almost number 3 pole. And here, give me, unless in between here no poles, then to have a too big a gap, looks like number 4 pole.
Okay, I assume, Dr. Lee, if you take a close look at this, does it appear that what we've been referring to as the sapling in photograph that bears the 101 card, that's more of a perspective shot, that the sapling and the stake are blocking one of our poles?
Yeah.
All right. So would the beeper be a little bit further back towards Ron Goldman's buttocks?
Again, that's two-dimensional. Looks like this picture could be even a little further here. If, it's kind of difficult now. If I go that far, here, impossible to have 3 poles in that little corner area. Something wrong with this diagram, something wrong with perspective of this picture. You can't eat the pie both ways.
Okay, is it correct to say that when we're interpreting photographs, we have some problems with perspective and distortions that occur?
Exactly.
As a result of photography?
Yes.
All right, so is there an area where you'd be more comfortable with placing this red dot, this red tape, than where you have it now?
If I know exactly how many poles, if you give me a number, I can evenly divide it up and count the number of poles, tell you exactly the location.
Would it be safe to say that the beeper appears to be far east, or at least east of Ron Goldman's shoulder?
And that doesn't make too much difference. I'll give you a little bit.
So, Dr. Lee, would it be fair to say that with respect to all of the blood stains that we referred to, or that you referred to on the board that you were shown by the defense, we were discussing Bundy, that all of them happened in an area that's west of the portion of the fence that is parallel to Bundy? They're west of there,
Yes,
and all of them are south of the fence that is parallel to the neighbor's yard.
with this particular set of picture, I don't have a overall shows this part. I did see another picture related to a railing. So, in other words, there are other patterns which are inability for me to see it. I only can test upon on the picture I saw.
And as to the pictures that you saw, all of the blood stains are to the east of...
West, to the west. That's the west direction.
Okay, well, I want to ask you about towards the east.
Towards the
Okay.
east.
All of the blood stains are to the east of the area where the stump is located.
The stump is located here. It's clearly it's the west side of the stump.
Okay, when I was saying stump, I was referring to the,
Oh,
what
this.
appears to be, yes.
Oh. Okay. A good portion is to the east. There are some, for example, this street. Those little spatter drops, it's appear to be to the west of the stump.
So would it be fair to say, Doctor, that with respect to the photographs that you discussed on direct examination, that these photographs and the location of the blood spatters indicate that the murder occurred in an area, with respect to Ron Goldman, about the size of a very small walk-in closet?
Like my house?
Maybe like my
I
house.
don't know, a definition of a small walk-in closet. I do know this area is 68 inches total. If we divide it by the pole, then we can get the number.
Your Honor, could I just, could I have a few more minutes, or do you want to break for lunch?
Do you have, do you have just a few more minutes?
Yeah, I just wanted to tie up this last.
All right, let's finish the exhibit.
Doctor, using the scale on the bottom of this exhibit, can we just get a measurement, let's see if we can do this, as to the approximate area that would contain all of the blood stains that we have here?
Your Honor, I think I have an objection to this on
Foundation.
foundational grounds.
Sustain.
As to what?
Foundation. Scale.
Well, I have to be heard on that, Your Honor, so perhaps we need to break for the...
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the morning session. Please remember all my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves, form any opinions about the case, conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you, or allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. We'll stand in recess until 1:15. All right, Dr. Lee, you can step down. All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter. All parties are again present. Jury is not present. Counsel, anything we need to take up before we launch back into it?
Well, there was the issue of the use of the scale diagram, Your Honor. And the diagram that we brought to court today is a combination, basically, of 3 exhibits. It has part of the exhibit that we used with Bill Bodziak of the Bundy Walk.
Let me see the diagram. Why don't you put it up on the jury box rail so I can see the diagram portion?
Your Honor, basically this is a combination of 3 diagrams. Part of the diagram is the Bundy Walk diagram that was testified to by Bill Bodziak, which is to scale, and the tiles are approximately 11.5 inches. And also the scale is the same as in the Bodziak diagram. So that's part of it. Then we also combined it with another diagram that just showed close in on the caged-in area, which the court will probably recall, with the outline of Ron Goldman's body and Nicole's body. And then, of course, we combined the defense diagram on here with all the photographs. So that's all this is, a compilation.
All right,
What?
or any other further comment on that? On the scale objection?
No, that's the scale.
Your Honor. I take it, Mr. Gold, before you take that down, the feet then refers to the Bodziak diagram. Is that, I mean, is the scale, where did that come from? Is that the Bodziak walkway?
The Bodziak diagram.
Right. See, I think the problem I have with this, Your Honor, is a few of them. Number one, I don't hear Mr. Goldberg making any representation that those bodies are drawn to scale in relation to the first, as Mr. Goldberg refers to it, the first plain walkway area and the closed-in area. Nor is Mr. Goldman's body, as depicted in that diagram, necessarily in scale in relation to the tree or the rest of the closed-in area. And the problem that I think we had with Dr. Lee and these photographs as he was being asked to draw lines is that in our photographs he did everything by pole placements, and then we have different photographs of Mr. Goldman's body in relation to these things that are taken from different angles. And frankly, it seems to me that it's already misleading. Dr. Lee has indicated as he was drawing the various, extending the tape, what some of these limitations were. But my concern at the end of the morning, and frankly my concern now, is that I had thought that somehow those bodies were drawn to scale. I wasn't too sure what the purpose of this was initially, but now it's apparent to me that it is misleading in terms of trying to place the beeper in relation to the body over the shoulder and the poles. I think that there's no foundation whatsoever that we can do that through this diagram. In fact, the photographic evidence seems to be in contradiction to the way that this is drawn.
Well, then this is a different objection than the one from you, which was simply to the scale. Does the court want me to address that?
Well, the objection is the scale of the bodies.
And the closed-in areas.
Well, the scale of, first of all, the scale of Nicole is irrelevant, basically, to the purpose for which this is shown. But see, some of these things, Your Honor, can be handled through independent evidence that's already been introduced.
No, just the simple question is, was there an attempt made to place the depiction of Ron Goldman's body? Was that any attempt to keep that in scale?
Yes. And what I'm telling Your Honor is that the only way that that can be done, to try to accurately to do that, is by looking at the crime scene photographs to figure out where he was placed. And we already have extensive crime scene photographs showing that. If the court and counsel want me to introduce every crime scene photograph on Ron Goldman with this witness so that we can make sure that this is proper, I'll do it. But I don't think that is what Mr. Scheck wants. I don't think that is in anyone's interest here. And the jury can simply look at the crime scene photographs we have and say, yeah, that's about right. It's what was about there. His head is up against the stump.
Your Honor, my point, I have a proposal for resolving this, and that is that I think the pictures speak for themselves in terms of what they show. My problem is that now it's clear to us that the closed-in area and the bottom walkway area and the bodies and where they're placed therein are not drawn to scale. Whereas this diagram, with its scale at the bottom, seems to give the impression that the entire thing is drawn to scale, when in fact all that's drawn to scale are the placement of the footprints and essentially the lifting of the Bodziak diagram. What I would request of the court is that there's an agreement of the parties that that is the only part of this diagram that is drawn to scale.
Well, that's just not true. I mean, the whole thing's
Oh,
wrong.
wait, don't interrupt his comment.
Well, he finished.
Well, I'm only trying to listen very carefully to the proffer. And the proffer, as I understand it, is that the walkway diagram, which shows the footprints, is drawn to scale, and the rest of it is not drawn to scale, and the depictions of the bodies in relation to those locations has not in any scientific way been drawn to scale.
Everything is to scale, and the only issue is the bodies, Your Honor. And the bodies are based on photographs.
All right.
That's the only way of doing it.
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection at this time on foundational grounds. Court has seen all of the photographs that have been involved in this case, plus been to the scene itself on numerous occasions. And the depiction on this chart, which is, I believe, People's Exhibit in the 593, I don't find it to be misleading. All right, let's proceed. Let's have the jury, please.
As the jury's coming in or after?
This diagram.
Oh, no.
Dr. Lee, would you resume the witness stand, please?
Yes. Dr. Hill?
All right, Dr. Lee is again on the witness stand undergoing cross-examination by Mr. Goldberg. Go ahead and have a seat, doctor. And we have exhibited to the jury People's Exhibit 593, which is a combination of crime scene photos and diagram of 875 South Monday. Also, counsel, I'm going to direct you that during the course of the trial, I don't want anybody in the clerk's well while court's in session. Mr. Goldberg.
Your Honor, just as a reminder, this exhibit does have one photograph.
Right.
Okay.
Proceed.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, Dr. Lee.
Go after.
Now that you've sat down, maybe you can get back up off the witness stand and help us with this exhibit again. Dr. Lee, using the scale that we have down here, can we just get an estimate of the area that contains the various blood stains and blood spatters that we've now diagrammed on this exhibit? And why don't you just watch me do this and see if I'm doing it correctly. Okay, now, I put the ruler up indicating that on this diagram there's about 3.5 inches between the corner of the gate and the approximate area of the last stain.
Yes.
So on our scale, that would be approximately 3 feet 10 inches, something in that neighborhood. A little under 4 feet.
4 feet.
So let's just, to keep it simple, say 4 feet.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to measure the gate that's parallel with Bundy on this diagram. And I'm measuring that to be about 5 1/4 inches.
Correct.
And on our diagram, that's about 5.5 feet.
That's correct.
Is that true? So the area that contains all of the evidence that you've referred to is roughly 4 feet by 5.5 feet.
That's correct.
Okay. And, Your Honor, if the court knows, how long are the panels on the jury box? Are those 3 feet?
I don't know. I believe they are.
Unless, why don't we measure out? Well, we said it was 5.5 feet, Doctor.
Yes.
Okay, so 5.5 feet. Why don't we do it from the end of the jury box? So 5.5 feet is a little bit less than 2 panels here.
Yes.
All right. And we said it was a little under 4 feet, but just to keep it simple, let's say 4. So the square that we've kind of delineated here between the end of the jury box where this tape occurred intersects with the jury box
That's a rectangle.
rectangle,
That's
right? Where I'm holding it and back. This rectangle is about the area where all of the evidence is that we've referred to on this diagram.
Yes, sir.
So you can resume the witness stand. So, Doctor, is it fair to say that all of the evidence that we have in this case of a homicide in terms of the confrontation, the physical confrontation, is in a very, very tiny geographic area?
4 feet by 5.5 feet. The majority evidence in that area, rectangle.
And is all of the evidence consistent with the homicide of Ron Goldman having occurred within that geographic area?
I cannot say anything about walkway because no indication, no information There are so many footprints, so many bloodstains on the walkway. But the caged area, that area alone is 4 by 5.5 feet, that general measurement.
Is there anything that you found that is inconsistent with the homicide of Ron Goldman having been committed within that 4 by 5.5 approximate foot area?
Whether or not that's the location started, I don't know. But I do know that's a struggle in that area and an end in that area.
And there's no evidence that it occurred in any other area that we are able to find, or that you are able to find based on photographs, is that correct?
Based on photograph, I see quite a few footprints on the walkway, lower walkway, near the entrance.
And many of those were dog prints and the like.
Many are dog print, others appear to be shoe print. However, took in an angle, I cannot tell you exactly what it is.
Were those some of the Bruno Magli shoes
Yes,
that
exactly.
Mr. Bodziak referred to? Just getting back to the issue of reconstruction very briefly, sir, do you agree that in the area of reconstruction that there are many, many limitations on ability of a forensic scientist to be able to tell us precisely what happened based on blood splatter analysis?
Yes, sir.
And do you agree that we can never reconstruct with certainty what happened, and that only one person ever really knows in a homicide?
I think more than one person should know. Why one person knows?
The person that was there at the time?
Yeah, any person there should know.
Okay. But other than the person that was there at the time, has it been your stated position on previous occasions that no one will ever be able to reconstruct with precision what happened other than the people that were there?
Depends on if we have cases, I can determine precisely what happened. For example, if I have a camera, videotape running, taping the whole scene during the commission of the crime. Or I have a case, a tape recording kick on. Subsequently, I can hear and look at the pattern, I can reconstruct. So it depends on if no such recording device, the reconstruction only can as good as whatever evidence remains.
All right. But even outside the extraordinary cases where we have a tape recording or a camera, or those cases where there is a witness, a surviving witness, we have to be very careful in terms of how we try to reconstruct.
Yes, sir.
And is it your position, sir, that the correct interpretation of bloodstains depends upon a careful examination and experience in reconstruction, and that over-interpretation of bloodstain patterns could be equally dangerous and misleading as under-interpretation?
Yes, that's correct.
In other words, we don't want to say too much about what happened.
Yes, sir.
Now, Dr. Lee, in this particular case, are you able to say anything about what happened based upon the evidence that you've had? I'm not talking about pathologists, setting that aside. Based upon your evidence, are you able to say anything about the order or sequence of events?
The order and sequence event, to a certain extent, I can say. Precisely, I cannot.
To what extent can you say?
Mr. Goldman have to get to the scene. That's the first order of business.
Well,
Somebody has to be there.
okay, well, other than things that are obvious, I'm talking
Well,
about from
that's not
bloodstain.
obvious. A lot of people, obvious scene, they don't recognize, still not obvious.
Okay, but just based on the blood spatter, for
Right.
example, are you able to tell us how many times Ron Goldman was stabbed based on blood spatter?
I can tell based on when I examine the shirt.